Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I lived most of my life in a village named Malak, Chiflik in Bulgaria. It wasn't a small place, but everybody knew each other and everybody knew about the weird stuff that would happen once in a while, but nobody spoke about it. My first encounter with the strange happened when I was 7. It was nighttime and my friends and I were at the only park there. Our parents were at a restaurant nearby and some of the older kids were also at the park. At one point I was alone sitting on a slide when the street lights went out. So I am sitting there in the dark and I look at a house that is across from the park. Above it was hovering a silver flying saucer. I watched it for 5 minutes before it disappeared. I decided not to tell the others, but when I approached them they asked me if I saw it. On the same night around 12:30 a.m. my mom and I started heading home. As we are walking, we are nearing a turn in the road near a little dirt road on the right side of it that leads to a couple of houses. Suddenly my mom stops me. I ask her why and she just shusses me. So I look at what she is looking at and there is a man walking in front of us with really long arms that were reaching his knees and a head that was turned 180 degrees looking at us. It disappeared at the turn of the road and a couple of seconds later there was a bright light. We stood there for a bit before continuing. Even today my mom rarely speaks of it. 2 months later, in the middle of the summer, most of my peers had gone on vacation or visited other families. A couple of the older kids wanted us to go and pick cherries at this large cherry tree belonging to a man that lived at the edge of the village. A few local adults, when they saw where we were heading, warned us not to go, but we didn't listen. Before we even reached the place we hear some strange noises behind some bushes. So we decided to check it out. Past the bushes was an open field. On it was a dead cow and feeding on it was an unknown creature that would fit the description of a dogman or werewolf. It turned its head towards us, its red eyes looking directly at me. It grimaced at us, showing all of its teeth. We started running and didn't stop until we were at the center of the village. Later that same night, it's time for me to head home. The road that leads to my neighborhood is kind of surrounded by forest. As I am passing by a cornfield I hear a growl from a little path that goes into it. I look at the path and it is pitch dark. The only thing I can see are red eyes and the grimacing smile that starts to form. I start running and that thing chases after me. It gains on me and I swear it said, "You are mine," in a very deep, menacing voice. At this moment my neighbor's dogs start barking and I see them rushing towards me from up the road. Thanks to them the creature lost its momentum for a bit and I managed to reach the gated fence. I climbed over and sprinted across the yard and into the house. The dogs continued barking for a while. Even today, 18 years later, I sometimes have nightmares about it. A few years later, in the evening, I was playing at the park when I looked at the sky and saw a bright yellow star falling down. As I watched, it suddenly stopped and started doing some maneuvers before flying up and disappearing. 2 weeks later, a friend and I are near the place where I encountered that beast when he spots the same object falling down in the distance. We watch it as it stops and hovers above a forest before landing into it. The next day we are there again with a bunch of kids telling them about the star when we see the field next to that forest in flames, which would disappear and reappear on a different spot. Maybe someone could explain that, but it was weird.
I'm a guy in my 20s. I'm quite tall, 193 centimeters, 6 feet 4 inches, and train in kickboxing. My career choice is quite physically straining because I'm a vet student. There isn't much that scares me and I'm usually an intimidating dude. My university is on top of a hill and outside of the city of Sofia, Bulgaria. From my dorm window, on the 7th floor, I can see huge wheat fields in the nearby forest. My first encounter was last year in late summer 2019. I have a German Shepherd, Hades, and a husky pup, Ragnar. That day I left university quite late. It was already dark outside. Usually, I don't mind taking them out at night. At night I can let them run without their leashes. They are trained and I know they are going to listen to me. Besides, I knew everyone knew them and wouldn't hurt them even if they were left outside. They have collars that light up since Hades is fully black and Ragnar is fully white, which makes it hard to see him during the winter. I could see them all the time. We walked for a while and they were playing and running around. At some point, Hades stopped and started growling, looking into the wheat fields down the hill. I didn't think about it. There are bats, owls, and other critters around us. I leashed them, not wanting to run after them if they decided to chase something. After half an hour of non-stop growling, I had enough of it and decided to take Hades home and go out so Ragnar can run a bit more. I got home and expected him to go in his cage. He likes sleeping there and I never locked them. That night though, all he did was stand on the window looking out. Since the pup was whining wanting to go out again, I tried to drag Hades in the cage and lock him in until I got back. Who knew, maybe he might try going out the window. I got a look out the window. In the parking below I saw a black figure circling the cars. Thinking that it might be someone trying to steal something, I got a flashlight and shone at it. It wasn't a thief. It wasn't human at all. It looked up, its eyes reflecting the light from the flashlight. It was black, its head looking very similar to Hades. It was standing on all fours, but when I shone the light it stood up. The roofs of the cars were barely reaching its midsection. It let out a growl, which I later learned that many of the tenants have heard. Hades went wild trying to bust out of the cage. Ragnar was whining even louder. I realized he didn't want to go out. He was trying to get as far away from the window as possible. The growl made me flinch and I dropped the flashlight through the window. I tried to see it again, but it was too dark. I heard the crunching of snow as it left. The next morning I went to find my flashlight and found huge dog-like footprints in the snow and a foul smell still lingering. I borrowed infrared binoculars from a hunter friend of mine. Ever since then I have seen it 4 times in the forest, twice crossing the field and once coming near the hill looking up. My roommate and I have been taking turns keeping watch at night when Hades starts growling. I don't take the dogs out at night and Ragnar doesn't play and run around anymore. He just stays pressed against my feet. I hope he grows out of it.
This next story is kept in its original form without any edits.
Everyone here's camping goes with the happiness of new experiences and new adventures. Our group was posted in the camp deep in the woods situated in Bulgaria. Honestly, we have our beliefs and folklore that we have heard about, but what we all saw was so different that even I can't explain it. We prepared ourselves to have a good time, some booze, and we hiked a couple of trails up the mountain nearby. We arrived rather fast at the campgrounds as I was sleeping deep and didn't recognize until Ivan shook me awake and I blinked away the sleepiness. We got into separate rooms for men and women. We were all around 18 and 19 years old, and soon we were all set. The few days went like a flash and we were accompanied by 2 elders that led the way to their local campfire grounds. It was far away from our camp, so we were walking. Eventually, we were close to our destination. But they say when there's someone staring at you and you feel their eyes boring into you, that was what I felt. I always was a skeptic, but now all my senses were heightened. Coming closer to the open space with a huge campfire, we all set up our little to-do list. Some were finding branches and twigs, others were preparing the food for the meal, some were talking to the elders. When our group was done with all our orders, we went to the watch point. It was like a watchtower, but without the amenities. It was open and huge that it couldn't allow many people on, and in it, it was a breathtaking sight. Coming down, I again felt like I was being watched. Like an intense watch that makes you turn around. So I did slowly and carefully as if not feeling its eyes on me. Nothing, there was nothing behind me, or rather I haven't seen it. As I was walking to the campfire, I heard thumps, like someone or something was running on 4 legs. Remembering it was a forest, after all, I stopped to see if it was an elk, fox, or something else. But then the horror hit me. The thumps stopped as soon as I did. I was shocked so badly I didn't recognize my friend Ivan trying to get my attention. "Hey, Earth to Dana. What did you see, a bird or an elk?" I shook my head and my brows rose in surprise as I spoke, "No idea, maybe it's just my imagination." She laughed and dragged me towards the campfire as I kept glancing back and having a bad feeling about it as we all sat down. I thought that maybe, just maybe, the hunger was making me hear things, and yet something was off. One of the guys, Nick, decided to visit the restroom facility, and strangely enough, he went with his plate with a good chunk of meat. We all chatted, already filled with delicious barbecued food, as we saw Nick rushing back as if he saw a ghost. We all looked at him as he explained, pointing to the plate that has only the sauce remains of where his piece of meat was. "I swear I'm not pranking you. I was taking a leak and I felt like something whooshed past me and I heard the sound of the plastic plate. So I turned around and saw that my food was gone. He had a bewildered look on his face. Everyone, even the elders, suggested that it was a wild animal that stole it. But the look in his eyes told something else. Some of the girls shared her piece of meat with him, but yet we were a bit worried. We collected all the plastic and remaining food into a trash bag that was set aside for us to take when we left the campfire grounds. The elders suggested walking around a bit and showing us a few other places with waterfalls and caves. As we walked across the horse path, looking at the indentations in the wet mud, we saw a few rather strange ones and stopped to observe. They were wide, like bears or canines, but how could it be so wide and big? Shrugging it off, we walked a bit further when the feeling hit me again. As I turned my head, I spotted a rather old tree house. I alerted the others in the group to continue ahead, not waiting for us. We all walked towards the house and we saw a ladder. It was just pieces of wood planks nailed to the tree heading up. We decided to climb up, as we heard a few twigs being broken and rustling as if someone was running around us. We stopped and decided to shrug it off. As we all climbed in, Nick, who was last to climb, yelped and screamed, "Get inside now." We all gathered into the treehouse looking at him as if he was a lunatic. We looked at him for an explanation as he was shivering and trembling. I saw something huge down there running past me. We all panicked. I whispered, "It's a bear, right?" He looked around frantically as one of the boys took out a knife, which made me smile because it would be a toothpick towards such a huge animal. We heard some more running sounds. It was the sound of a four-legged animal. If it's a bear, could it climb in the house? My mind screamed. We all stood still as the running now was accompanied by the growl. It was not bone-chilling, but soon we heard the next sound. It was a mix of a howl of a wolf mixed with a human howling in insufferable pain. We all froze. It felt like a horror movie. We heard something climbing up a tree as we all stood still, cowering in the back of the treehouse. Looking out of the open window and saw a huge bear climbing up the tree. Has it sensed us? Was it hungry? My mind was going a mile per second as I realized something. The bear was not even looking in our direction. It was looking down. I took a step closer to the window, so did Nick. We both looked confused. What was wrong with this bear? I mean, I'm happy it wasn't attacking us, but what, in the name of everything, could have scared a bear? The answer came with a loud snarl and growling sounds, accompanied by the thumps and scratches. We both looked down. I wish I wouldn't have. This thing was huge. It was at least 8 feet tall, it had a huge snout and really sharp canines. It was black and its ears were pointed. The fur was black and its eyes were yellow. We were shocked, trying to process what these horrible creatures were. We all retreated from the window, as we thought it was trained on the poor bear. Then, someone was screaming our names, as I relaxed in relief. I peeked out to see the wolf-like thing retreat. Its body shape was the strangest of all. It was close to the human body, but more agile and more powerful. We tried to climb down as we heard some twigs falling and scratching as if next to us. One of the girls screamed bloody murder and we heard a thump and a bear running down the opposite side of the road. We all bolted down, nearly stumbling and falling off as we saw the elders rushing towards us. We were paler than a paper sheet. Walking back, we saw a rather peculiar sight. The bonfire was broken up, the trash bag was ripped open and the food scraps were gone. The group stood there petrified and the elders checked for any animals around. When they found nothing, we picked up the trash again and left. This time our group was practically running towards the camp. As the others mocked us, we tried to play it off. As we ran back, I felt it again. The dread of being watched and thinking that at the campgrounds we would be safe. We all headed towards the old tower. It was abandoned and the bell inside was ripped off. The door was metal and heavy, so we decided to close it just in case. Gathering up, we all let out deep breaths and huffs, as some decided to hit a smoke before the elders came back. "What was that thing?" said Elisa, inhaling the smoke as if it would calm her nerves down. "No idea, Elisa." "It was something bigger than the bear." Nick added, still looking to the outskirts of the fence. Later on, I was talking to John, who was from the US and was an exchange student coming to visit and learn more about our country. He gulped, "It's not a thing." He hardly spoke, as if something as a memory flashed across his face. "It's a dog, man." Everyone looked at him bewildered. My grandpa encountered one when he was camping in northern Wisconsin. He said it was terrifying, even scarier than a horror movie. It was gray, but it had these yellow eyes that scared Grandpa, and he ran away, leaving his tent behind. It was chasing after him, taunting him. Grandpa knew if he stopped he would die or worse. So he hid in a cave, and the next morning a group of rescue people helped him out of the forest. He said he'll never forget how terrified he was then. He even didn't return to retrieve his belongings. We all listened, realizing how just lucky we were to be alive and in one piece. But our peace was disturbed once again by this terrifying howling scream. Everyone started to look around like owls, trying to find the source. Then I spotted it, standing on its hind legs. It was something straight from the Van Helsing movie. It was sniffing the air, and its ears were moving as it took a close step towards the barbed wire fence. We stood and looked at each other. I felt dread filling my whole body. My hands were sweating and the pulse of my heart was skyrocketing. If I was to face it, I would be dead where I stand, and this realization made me whimper. Everyone was panicking once again as some of the guys slammed shut the metal door behind me. Slowly, I tried to come back to my senses and breathe steadily. We were quiet for a moment, and then I spoke, "We're not mental." "I know it. People don't get mental together. This is the real thing that was in the woods chasing the bear." Everyone agreed silently as we all walked back quietly. Feeling somewhat safe, most of the group went to sleep. But I couldn't sleep that night as I was on edge. It turns out that everyone was also on edge and couldn't sleep. You see, I was a skeptic and non-believer. But this experience made me and my friends scared to go camping. Even if it's a huge group, I'd rather stay inside. But what truly makes a non-believer a believer is an experience of facing it yourself. The bear was enough for me to set the uneasiness in the depths of my soul. Whatever you call it, it still makes me wake up in a cold sweat, looking frantically around and checking my door and window locks. Sometimes I still have the feeling of being watched.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.